Well, I am very excited to be here with you today. That song we just sang, Psalm 34, is actually kind of the psalm that we began planting our church on. My family and I moved out here in May of 2015, so it was a little over 7 years ago, coming up 7.5 years ago here. And when we moved out here, I had been a pastor for a while. I was a church planter in St. Louis, where we were born and raised. And we came out here not to plant a church. We came out here because our hearts were just burdened for what we believe God wanted to do out here. And it was one of those, we knew people must have been praying for more laborers for the harvest, as Jesus tells us to, because we felt like after a while, we can't not go out there and be a part of what God is about to do and be a part of the need. And so I came out and took a job as kind of an associate pastor, more of a consulting pastor at a church that was looking to revitalize. And so I wore a lot of different hats throughout that time. And my wife is a therapist, not a physical therapist, an LPCC. If you don't know, then that's what it is. That's exactly LPCC. And so she's a clinical counselor, and she works out of Christian counseling centers in San Mateo. And so she was able to transfer her license, and we came out here. And one of the things that I had in my mind, one of these kind of misconceptions I had in my mind that was just a little bit off was that if we are so far reached or so unreached out in the Bay Area, right? And Barna had done some research right when we were moving out here that said that the Bay Area was the most unchurched and dechurched region in the nation, okay? And I thought, man, they must hate God, right? They must hate God. So what am I getting myself into, right? So we come out here and we just start building relationships, and we're getting to know all of our neighbors. And the church that I was working for was on the far other end of the town. I mean, like, there are cliffs. It's in San Mateo up in the hills. And so there are cliffs right there. And where I lived was on the far east side of the town, where the water to Foster City, like where it barriers us to Foster City, is there. And so we were totally different areas. And so even the church I was working for wasn't doing, a lot of work where we lived. And so we were just building relationships. We were getting to know people. And here's something I learned when we came out, is that people don't hate our God. People don't know our God, but people sure hate the God that they think we serve, right? And there's this mindset out here of, and I think everywhere, I won't just say out here, but if you're, our city's 3.4% reach, so I'd say out here it's pretty prevalent. But there was a mindset out here of, here's who God is and here's why I don't like him. Right? He's hurt me. He's shamed me. He's breaking relationships. He's just, for me growing up, it was, man, God is just this kind of rule-making God. He wants to steal my joy. It was my understanding of God growing up, is he wants to steal my joy. Because he had all these rules that took away all the fun stuff in life. And so he must want to steal my joy. And once I got to know who God was at 18 years old, I realized, man, I don't like that God that I pictured growing up. Nothing changed about that, but that wasn't this God, right? That wasn't this God. And so we realized as we come out that people were turning their hearts to the one true God as we got to build those relationships and talk with them about who God really is. And we got to say things like, I don't like that God either. Like the God you're describing, I would never follow him. I certainly wouldn't go spend a fortune in seminary and go become a pastor to make nothing and serve him in that way, right? Because that God you're describing is broken and hurtful, and I just wouldn't do that. So we saw people starting to get to know God through that. And when we were understanding that, as we prayed through church planting, which I had already planted a church, so I already knew I didn't want to do it when we started to feel God calling us into that. But what we did is my wife and I took a week where we didn't talk about that. We spent lots of time together, but we didn't talk about that. And we just prayed separately, and we fasted, and we had journals. And I'm not a journaler, so that was interesting. But we just started writing things out. And when we came back together after a week, we kind of looked at it, and what we had was Psalm 34:8, both of us. Just had Psalm 34:8 written down in several different places, and there were so many notes and things coming from that. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed are those who take refuge in him. And the name refuge came from that, because that's what people in our area needed to know, that God isn't who you're saying he is. He's actually a refuge from anyone who is like that. He's a refuge from the life that would come from a relationship like that. And so their refuge was born. And when you plant a church, guys, you can't plant a church alone. And when you are an existing church, you can't be an existing church alone. And so it's one phase after another. It takes something that we at our church call kingdom collaboration, all right? Kingdom collaboration. And that's what we're gonna be talking about this morning is that kingdom collaboration. I dove into your YouTube page this week to kind of say, hey, what is this church kind of, what's the feel here? What's it look like here? And I got really excited and I started diving into more and more of these messages with the talk about your core values. And so I'm sorry we're taking a break from your core values this morning, but I am very excited that we are still kind of sticking with that theme because kingdom collaboration is one of our core values as a church. And so we're not taking away the series, we're gonna shift it, right? To from this local church to another local church who work together in this thing. And so I think kingdom collaboration is really important for us to talk about. I think really not just important, but I think appropriate maybe for us to talk about because our two local churches are in this kind of collaboration to some degree. And I think it's something that is just going to be cultivated and grown over time. For those of you that don't know, maybe you're new here, maybe it's just not an aspect of this you've dove into before, but FirstSF has been generously supporting Refuge Community Church since our first launch, as Ben mentioned. We've seemed to have launched like 4 times since we got this thing started. Thank you, COVID. But since our first launch, you guys have been supporting what we're doing to reach and raise the people in San Mateo. You've been right there alongside of that with us, and not just to do that work, but to establish God's church there for the long haul. Right? And so Refuge, we may be the boots on the ground there, so to speak. We may be the boots on the ground, but we're limited without the support you've shown, without your prayer support. Your prayers have been breaking down walls and opening doors that we've been able to run through. So without you being a part of that with us, we're extremely limited. We're ready to run, and we need people to help us to break down those walls, to break down those barriers and let us run through that, right? And we may be serving our city regularly through various projects and different opportunities that we provide for them and events and activities and things like that. But it's been your financial support that's helped provide all that we've needed in order to carry those things out, right? Because we couldn't have done the things that we've done without you. We've collaborated to reach our region, right? Because we aren't trying to just reach our neighbors, not just trying to, that's where we start, but we're trying to reach a world, right? It's not so small, it's huge because that's what God called us to. If you look back at Acts 1:8, the commandment was, Jesus said to his people that power is going to come upon you. That's the Holy Spirit, and you're going to be my witnesses. He says here, there, and everywhere, right? Jerusalem, Judea, even those Samaritan people, right? Even them. And then to the ends of the earth, right? And so here, there, everywhere, all people. And he said that to his church, to his body. And as his body began to grow over time, and as they turned into 3,000 in one day on Pentecost, and as they turned into 5,000 just days later after that, and as the dispersion happened through persecution, and the church had to go and spread out and be a part of, into Samaria, deep into Samaria, and all the places all over the known world at that time, it was still one church on one mission. One church, one mission, reaching communities all over the world. Right, and the commission and the commandment never shifted to, okay, now you guys just focus on you, and you focus on you alone, right? And we'll quit talking to each other, we'll quit doing this together. I think we've spread out enough. I think this is handled. It never shifted to that at all. It always was and always is still today, this one command, one commission that you, my people, are to reach people here, there, and everywhere, and you're to do it together. Right? You're to collaborate in order to make this thing happen. And so I'm thrilled to say that together, our two churches and others, by the way, we've led more than 50 people to relationship in Jesus in San Mateo just since we've launched, right? Just since we launched. And COVID has actually taken up more time in our church plant than not, right? 50 people. And so thank you for that. Yeah, I think it's good to celebrate these things. It's great to celebrate these things. And we need to understand that whatever role we play in these things is a crucial role that God has called us to play in order to be a part of what God is doing all over the world, right? Every prayer, everything that we send out, every aspect of this thing that we're a part of, it's a part of the whole. It's absolutely necessary to make these things happen. It's kind of like a football team. I didn't do any research on this, so this is not going to be fun, but I hope it still makes sense. It's kind of like a football team if you look back at out of the 80s 49ers, right? If you look back at the 80s 49ers, I grew up a 49er fan because I'm from St. Louis, and the St. Louis Cardinals moved to Phoenix when I was very, very young. and the Rams didn't come until I was like late high school, going into college. So who do you love in the 80s when you love football and don't have a home team, right? It was the 49ers. So I grew up 49ers fan, and we could talk about some names of people that we know on those 49ers championship team. We could talk about Montana, right? We love Montana. We can talk about Jerry Rice. We can talk about people like this. But let me ask you a question. Who was the center? Who's the center? And for those of you, you're like, I don't do football, I don't understand this. The center is the guy who starts with the ball in the line of scrimmage, and he's the one that gets the play going by snapping the ball to the quarterback, or if they're, a redirect, whatever it is. But he snaps the ball. Anybody know who the center was? Man, me neither. But did you know that if that center wasn't doing his job and playing his role wholeheartedly, that we wouldn't know who Joe Montana is either? We wouldn't. We absolutely wouldn't know, because as much skill as Montana had, if he was just completely overcome with defenders every single play, how could he ever do what he's able to do? We wouldn't know who Jerry Rice is either. He'd been that guy that came up out of college and had potential, right? And so every single role, known or unknown, whether we're here in this place or we're over in the Middle East or wherever we're at, and what we're doing is so crucial to the whole outcome of what God is wanting to establish here on earth and accomplish here on earth. And so we need to understand that just as we are one part of a whole body, that body is one part of a greater body, and we need to continue to play those roles throughout the world. And that's kind of what unity really looks like, and that's what collaboration really looks like. But it's something unity is something that I think we don't really understand. I don't think we understand collaboration as much as we would like to, as much as our hearts actually want to, because I think we're stepping toward these things, but it may not be understood so well how important, how beautiful, how joyful, how life-giving actual unity can be. And so I want to look at Psalm 133 today, and we'll move into some other places as well, but this is where we're kind of anchoring this morning. Psalm 133, and we're looking overall at verses 1 through 3 there. And so I'll read all three verses, and then I just want to pick at it just a little bit here. In Psalm 133, this is one of the songs of ascent, all right? So David wrote this, and it says in verse 1, how good and pleasant it is when God's people live together in unity. It is like precious oil poured on the head, running down on the beard, running down on Aaron's beard, down the collar of his robe. It is as if the dew of Hermon were falling on Mount Zion. For there the Lord bestowed his blessing, even life forevermore. Now, some of you are going, okay, I heard unity in there. I heard that it's good and pleasant, but these descriptions don't sound good or pleasant to me. Because when I read this, I'm like, man, it's how good and pleasant it is for God's people to dwell together in unity. I'm like, yes, I'm in. He's like, it's like oil being dumped on your head and running down your beard. And I'm like, that sounds awful. That sounds really, really bad to me. And so that's not something that I would appreciate. Maybe a different illustration would be good for me. But so I read that and I go, what must that have meant for it to sound so awful to me, but be something that's being lifted up so much here, right? And what does it really mean to be good and pleasant? Because unity is huge. And so those words, good and pleasant, I don't know about you, but I'm not like the greatest things in the world. I don't talk about my marriage and the day we got married, the day my kids were born. I'm like, it was pleasant. That was some pleasant stuff, And so it's more powerful than that, right? And so we need to kind of understand here, what really is unity? How good is unity? And how is this description really played into that? What does it mean for us when God invites us into unity and calls us to carry that out together? Well, first off, good and pleasant, right? They seem like understatements. Maybe you guys picked up on that too. We're like, it's good and pleasant. We're like, that's all right. Unity's cool, right? It's cool. Cake's good. Unity's cool. I like the beach, right? Kind of on the same line. Those words are actually much deeper than we get in English, because if you've ever spoken multiple languages or read multiple languages or attempted to learn them in school at some point, you know that some words don't translate as perfectly as we would like into other languages, right? And these words, good, which is the Hebrew tone, means invaluable. It means invaluable, right? Of the deepest, greatest value, can't be described. And pleasant, na'im, it means sweet. It means beautiful. It means delightful, right? It's sweet. It's beautiful. It's delightful, right? Delightful means it brings fullness of joy to the heart and to the life, right? This is bigger than the beach is cool, right? This is incredible. It's invaluable for us. We absolutely need this, and it brings the fullness of joy to our lives, all right? And so So how invaluable and delightful is this unity amongst God's people, right? Verse 2, it's like precious oil poured on the head, running down the beard, running down on Aaron's beard, down the collar of his robe. So what on earth is the psalmist talking about here? And this is huge for us to grasp as we aim toward unity in our own lives as churches and as God's as universal church. And back in Exodus, God is instructing Moses on the building of the tabernacle, right? Their place of worship that would move from them from place to place. And he's giving out all the detailed instructions of how you're to build this and go about that and prepare for this and worship me in these ways, right? And they're very detailed instructions on this. And in chapter 30, the Lord instructs Moses to combine together a very specific list of ingredients to create an anointing oil that when poured over the heads of Aaron and his sons, the priests right there, that it would make them holy before God. It would make them holy before God. And it would consecrate them to God's purpose, right? To his purposes. Now think about what that would have meant to a sinner like Aaron. A sinner like Aaron, in a time before our time, before Jesus had come and paid the debt for all. So we have this sinner like Aaron who is just going to the bone trying to earn his way to God or earn favor with God, earn righteousness with God. And understanding that he can't ever earn that on his own and learning that day after day. And so he's in this place where he wants God so much, but he sees himself so broken, so weak that he cannot make his way there. And then he comes to this place. What would it have meant for a sinner like him to be made holy and consecrated for such a purpose? Right? How must it have felt as that oil, knowing what it meant, knowing what it was, as that oil ran down his face, washing him, right? Washing away the sins that he's committed, the choices that he's made to turn against the God that created him and loves him, right? And that oil invited him into this greater purpose, right? This life that's greater than he could have ever imagined for himself. Imagine him in that place. That's a whole lot different than me getting some canola oil and pouring on my head. That's why I didn't understand the illustration there, right? But what's happening is we're talking about unity is like this. Unity is like this, is this empowering and life-giving, right? We're washed clean by God in that unity, right? And many of us have experienced that in community with one another, how it shapes us, how it brings us life, how it encourages us and moves us forward, right? We're shaped in those times. We're empowered in those times to live as those that are set apart for a greater God-given purpose, right? So it's a huge illustration there. Jesus puts it like this as he prayed for us in John 17. He says, the glory which you have given me, praying to his Father, I also have given them so that they may be one just as we are one. I and them, you and me, that they may be, I love this, they may be perfected in unity. They may be perfected in unity. This is huge, right? This is important. So that the world may know that you sent me and you loved them just as you loved me, right? So perfected in unity, made complete in unity. And as we're being made complete in unity, the world gets to see who God is in us, and they get to know him, and they get to walk with him as well. And so washed clean and utterly transformed, right? God works in our united lives to perfect us, complete us. And he works through our unified lives to carry out his great purpose to the whole world, here, there, everywhere, everybody. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that a little more powerful than it's good and pleasant? It's like oil on your head. That's huge, right? This is huge. So the psalmist continues, verse 3. It's as if the dew of Hermon were falling on Mount Zion, for there the Lord bestows his blessing, even life forevermore. And Hermon, Mount Hermon, is this high, snow-capped mountain at the northern end of the land. And the water that flows from those caps, is crucial for vegetation during the dry season that comes. So we can maybe look at it a little bit like Tahoe, if there's a lot of snow on Tahoe, then we get a lot of water that comes down from Tahoe, right? It's absolutely huge, really important for us. It was so important for them, right? And so the unity of God's people, he says, is like that water that comes down from the mountain, from Mount Hermon, flowing from those snow-capped mountains, creating life where life couldn't otherwise be created and established, right? Fulfilling what was necessary, feeding what was necessary for life to grow. Our unity's like that. Our unity's like that. So it's like the unity of God's people is so powerful, and it is so life-giving. It's world-changing, right? This calling on our lives to be unified, right? And I don't think that any of us would disagree that unity is good and pleasant, right? I don't think anybody would disagree that it's good and pleasant. The problem that I see so often is that maybe we don't truly understand what this good and pleasant thing called unity really is and what it's really about. Or maybe we kind of have an idea, but we don't know the depth of it, and so we're not experiencing all that it offers in our lives and through our lives. So what does God mean when he calls us to be unified? What does he really mean by this? Just so you know, we can't cover this in the next few minutes, okay? But we're gonna dive into the heart of it. We're gonna dive into the heart of it today so that we can start moving our lives into that space, and we can start growing together in that way that he's gonna describe to us. And so there are a couple things that I want us to understand and really internalize today about the unity that God has called us into with one another, right? And remember, as I said earlier, we're talking the whole church when we talk about one another. We're talking one mission carried out by all of us, right? And we have our local church body, and there are great and beautiful purposes in that. I wouldn't be planting local church bodies if I didn't believe that. But if our mindset and our motivation, they stick with local church first and don't understand the depth and the power and the beauty, the joy that comes from what it looks like for us to work together as a global universal church, then we're gonna miss out, and we're not gonna carry out all that God has in store for us. So it's important to know both and understand both. So the first thing that I just want us to understand about unity today is that unity is more than uniformity. Unity is more than uniformity, right? For some of us being unified, we have a few different maybe ideas, and this is probably an exhaustive list. I'm gonna mention 3 things, okay? But it's probably an exhaustive list of how we might define unity, how we might understand unity. For some of us, being unified, it simply means being amiable, right? That's the word. Friendly. I mean, like the conflict is not there, right? Amiable. All right. I'm from Missouri. We gotta work with me here, okay? And so for many of us, we're like, hey, if we're not in conflict, if we're not, battling each other, then we must be unified. That's where unity is. And we talk sometimes like there's so much, conflict going on within this group, within these people, and we just need unity. Like it's the opposite of conflict, right? Conflict into unity. And for others, it means that we align on certain political issues or things like that. And for many people, though, unity is a picture of uniformity to them, right? That we kind of look the same and do the same things, right? It's like that a lot with churches, too. The first thought when we talk about, am I going to work with this church? We start to go, but do we do all the same things? Do we think all the same things? Do we look the same way? Are we trying to do this program the exact same way? Can we really work together, people? Like we start to get into this thing, like we have to be completely uniform. And I'll tell you right now that that's not it, because that takes diversity out of the entire picture. I hope you and I aren't doing everything all the same all the time, because we're not going to reach anybody that's different than us. But these ideas and so many more it's not that they're wrong, it's that they're not unity. It's that they're more like fruit that grows off of a tree of unity. Right? If unity is a tree, then it produces these different kinds of sweet and good fruits. And these things I just mentioned are more like the fruit of that, but it's not what we strive for. We strive for the unity that's producing these things. Right? True unity, it runs so much deeper and so much further than we may understand it to be. And it's described and displayed all throughout the Old and New Testament. But one of them that one kind of passage, one way that I really love it described is in 3 John, verse 8. It only has one chapter, so 3 John, verse 8. And it says, beloved, you are acting faithfully in whatever you accomplish for the brothers and sisters, and especially when they are strangers. Therefore, we ought to support such people so that we may prove to be fellow workers with the truth. Fellow workers with the truth. And so this idea of unity here is found in that phrase, fellow worker. Right, it's fellow workers. That's the NASB. If you're looking at different ones, the NIV says working together in that. The NLT, that's the New Living Translation, calls it partnership, and the Message calls it companionship. Okay, and so we can slap any English word that kind of makes some sense to it and put that on there. But the picture of unity here comes from a Greek adjective that is sunergos. Sunergos. There we go. Tell my professors, all right? It's been a long time, and we can do this. All right, and synergos is the interaction. This is beautiful. The interaction of elements that, when combined, produce a total effect that is greater than the sum of the individual element. Okay, I'll say that again. It's the interaction of elements, when combined, produce a total effect that is greater than the sum of the individual elements. Okay, it's where we get our word synergy from, right? It's where we get our word synergy from, directly from this Greek word. Physiologically, it's the cooperative action of two or more muscles, nerves, or the like, right? It's the cooperative action of two or more muscles, nerves, or the like. And so unity isn't just like agreeing on things. And unity isn't just saying, hey, we kind of do these things the same way. And unity it's actually much more than even like a partnering together. Unity is doing this thing as one, right? It's as one. It's as Jesus prayed, hey, I want them to be one just as you are one and with me. Right, it's actually being one, and in our actions together, we're different, right? Some are muscles, some are tendons, some are these things, right? We're different, and we're gonna look different, and we're gonna act different, but when we together grow together and move together and work together as one, then this greater thing happens that produces a total effect that is greater than the sum of all the individual parts. So unity is like the locking of arms. It's like the locking of arms together, despite any minor differences we may have, to carry out a greater purpose together than we could ever carry out on our own. You were called to reach Jerusalem, Judea, even those Samaritans, and all the way to the ends of the earth. You were called to reach this neighborhood in your workplace, in your school, and all the schools here, and all the workplaces, and all the neighborhoods. You were called to be a part of every person knowing the person and work of Jesus Christ. You were created for that, not just your workplace, but my workplace. That's unfair. His workplace, his workplace, your workplace. And so it's like all together that we are a part of this one thing when we work together. It's like a team that works together to accomplish their goals. It's like a center playing his role, even though the guy behind him is the one that's going to get the glory, right? It's like just playing whatever role that you are given to the fullest so that you are a part of everything God is doing. It's like the great theologian John Wooden used to remind his UCLA Bruins. He said, the man who puts the ball through the hoop has 10 hands. The man who puts the ball through the hoop has 10 hands. Someone's gonna get the glory for that basket, and they're gonna be marked up on that stat sheet, but it took 5 people, 10 hands, to do the work that led to that basket, that led to that win, that led to that stop, that steal, that block, whatever that was in the game. It took 10 hands to make that one thing happen. Someone may be written down in the stat book, in the record book, but it was every single person there that worked together to make that happen. Many of us have heard in the Bible where Paul talks about how we are, he talks about the church and he compares us to a human body, and he says, you're one body with many members, right? Many members. And so we're gonna have some ears, we're gonna have some mouths, we're gonna have a nose and some fingers, some toes. Some of us gotta be armpits, right? So that kind of happens. And as we work together, we do this, but many of us don't recognize that same thing, that same principle that's at work in our local church body that we need so desperately to fight together, stand together, grow together, reach the world around us together. It's necessary for us to do the same thing over in Kenya, in Somalia, in Australia, in Hillsborough, Missouri. All right? And so it's the same principle. But when I think about the body being one body, many members, if that's the local church, when I think about local churches coming together, any 80s kids in here? You grew up in like the 80s and you watched cartoons. All right, so this might hit home for about half of you then. The other half, we're gonna move past it quickly because we're wrapping up here. But for those of you that were there, I think of the churches being one body still, like Voltron. Right? We remember Voltron? Okay. It's like Voltron. And so Voltron is people, right? And there's people and they're fighting together, but sometimes something is greater than what the people can accomplish. And so they call in their robot lions, and inside these robot lions, they come together and they create a person out of robot lions. And this thing is a force, right? This is a force. And so we're able to do so much more than we could ever accomplish as individual humans. Man, I hope that hit home for somebody. Because let's be honest, that's a weird illustration, right? I hope it works. I hope it works. And so kingdom collaboration is crucial to God's great commission and what he told his disciples on that last day before he ascended. We can't carry out reaching the ends of the world. We can't even carry out reaching our neighborhoods, quite honestly, if you and I aren't working together to do that, aren't locking arms and saying, what will it take to make sure that these people hear and know the good news of Jesus Christ and have a connection with those so they can grow up and thrive in this new life. They can flourish and produce fruit with their lives. When you and I work together in that way, we can do incredible things. When we try and stand alone, we can't. We don't have it. And the joy can't even be there. Remember the oil coming down. It's good and it is pleasant. So it's not only the work being accomplished on the outside, it's the work being accomplished on the inside. You and I can have the fullness of life. That's John 10:10. Jesus came to bring it. Right? We can have that and the world around us can experience all of that when we are together in this thing. And so I'm so thankful to be even just here today with you, to be I've had so many great conversations and got to pray with a couple people and to be able to share this word with you today. And I think the challenge today is really in motive more than anything else. It's in motive in our individual hearts and in the hearts of our churches. As a church plant, my first church plant, it didn't go as well. And one of the reasons it didn't go as well is because we had the mindset of, when we get to this point, we'll start doing this. That's a mindset that's going to kill anything because you create a culture in everything that you're doing, right? And so we said we will start supporting other churches when we reach this point. And so we, as a church plant, started growing. And we were growing by looking at ourselves and just being all about ourselves and growing up about ourselves. And I said, okay, it's time for us to branch off. And we were like, what? We can't do that. Right? And so something that when we planted Refuge this time around, we said, hey, this is who we're going to be, is we're going to be a part of the whole here. We're going to be one part of God's global church here. Right? And so what is it going to look like for us to be very intentional to make sure that even when we have little, we're giving of that little. Even when we have a little bit of finances or energy, strength, wisdom, whatever it is that we have to offer, how are we going to give some of that? Right, and so we made sure that even in our first year, we were already supporting another church plant down in San Jose, New Valley Church in San Jose, and a missionary in South Dakota, because this is who we were gonna be, a part of the whole. And when we do that, we are able to change the entire world around us. And if we're looking to change a Bay Area that is the most unchurched and de-churched in the region, your church or my church are not going to do it, right? But our churches and other churches together are going to turn this entire region upside down, like we saw happen in the first church. And so let's check our motives this week. Let's check our hearts this week to see, am I really about me and this mission, or am I really about us and this mission? And what is it that I have? What can I bring to the table that when partnered with other elements around me can bring life and bring transformation to the world that God has placed me in? Let's pray